Welcome back to Not Just a Statistic channel. Today we have the honor to have Gary Dunnet, that is in New Zealand. He is the president of the International Association for Official Statistics. Thank you, Gary, to be with us. And good morning. Here in Europe is 11 in the evening, and you just start the day. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I start with the first question, that what are the official statistics? Take in consideration our audience is broad, not only statistician.
Well, the definition of official statistics can be quite difficult to pin down. But the way I look at them is statistics that are produced by government or public entities, and that actually aim to produce reliable, objective, and accessible information for decision-making, policy evaluation, and also public knowledge. How well is a country performing, GDP measures and such like that. So I sort of see that they have a number of characteristics, and they're sort of headlined by, being produced by recognised authorities, that have good standing, follow good principles, follow the fundamental principles of official statistics. Also, that the statistics should be for public good, and that they're available for citizens, accessible, researchers, policymakers, etc. And that's all about ensuring transparency and accountability. There's also the need for official statistics to be standardized and also continuous over time, so you can actually measures like GDP, so that we can compare how different countries are performing, but also how they perform over time. That's a really, really key aspect. And then the final bit that I've already sort of just touched on is that we have a fundamental set of principles of official statistics that are endorsed by the UN, the United Nations. And so that the statistical community is part of the United Nations. And so we have a number of principles that we must adhere to. So that relates to timeliness, accuracy, transparency, following good practice, meeting ethical demands. But, when you think about the use I've sort of touched on around policy making and governance, use of public information, putting in the public domain numbers and statistics that are unbiased and don't represent one political perspective or not, so that, the public can make a decision about, are they getting good value for money? Are we, as a country heading in the right direction? All aspects like that. And then the final bit that I've already touched on is international comparability.
Yep. Yes, you mentioned the GDP. Also, National Statistical Office, they produce the inflation, the poverty rate, also the unemployment rate. These are also official statistics that are used during the election campaign from the government, but also for the people to understand the best government and so on. And I would like to ask something a little bit, let's say, more on your professional, more personal. What made you fall in love or out of love with your work, with your statistics?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely in love with my job. I haven't fallen out of love. And I must admit that I've been very fortunate in my career to move within, the official statistical world, quite a lot. So I started in official statistics about 38 years ago. And I started as a methodologist, but I've moved around different parts of the statistical office, but also I've moved across countries as well. So not only have I worked in New Zealand, but I've worked in Ireland and Australia. And the key thing for me is the actual application of official statistics and seeing how it does change lives. So there is measures of the government and how we're performing through the GDP and the CPI and that, but also seeing how the CPI affects people today. What can they buy with their money? Are they seeing less expenditure on meat because the CPI, the price of meat is going up too high or whatever? So actually seeing societal change. Also, I've seen, I've been really intrigued, seeing how the measurement of societal change is changing as well. So, here in New Zealand, we've introduced measures for persistent child poverty. so we can actually measure, make sure that our services and our policies are aligned with actually what's happening to our children in poverty. So, and we see, across the world measures of, displaced people through wars or whatever. The migration patterns of Europe have certainly changed, and we're seeing lots of changes in migration. And so how all that is measured and how policies and interventions are undertaken. So for me, that's what official statistics is about. Is that use of public information, putting it into the open, so that people can actually see how governments and people react to different scenarios. So yeah.
Yes, just in the previous interview, Denise from Brazil, she said one good thing of the statistics that if you learn statistics, you can apply all over the world. Other topics is different, like a lawyer and so on, are very national, and you are the implementation of. You work in the different continent and country. Where are you from?
So I'm from New Zealand. From a small town called New Plymouth, which is it's a lovely town. But yeah. But I was just following on that theme, is that I was part of the small team that created the generic statistical business process model. In fact, I took it the early incarnation to the UN that then developed, and so I have a very fond, and I still have a very strong connection to the GSPPM. And what I must admit, I am truly amazed at how that and other standards are actually used across the world, and it's used in many different situations. So a lot of people use it for the mapping of processes, which is what it was and built for. But also, we're seeing applications into quality management, document management, even project management using the GSPPM as a framework. And so for me, I'm incredibly proud as I see different versions of it. And I don't always pipe up and say, hey, I created that, but it always is something that for me gives me real pride in my work. And I'm sure many statisticians around the world have similar, pieces of pride, because often what you do is you do it, you publish it, other stats officers, pick it up, they're interested in it, have lots of interest, and we have some really great fora in which to share. So we have the ISI Congress and the IAOS conferences, but also, the IAOS members are, strongly represented at JSOM, and also, Stats Canada's methodology forum, and that, we all sort of, we're not that tribal that we don't go and share our work. We're all the national community of statisticians. It's quite small, but we're very friendly.
Yes, I just come back from Boston, GSM.
Yeah.
Then you have a very successful and large career all over the world. If you could give a piece of advice a young statistician just entering in the field today, what would it be?
I think it's about, in the early parts of your career, learning as many methods as you can, and being very broad, having a good broad base of knowledge, and thinking, taking opportunities to explore different areas. So there's lots and lots of webinars available. There's like, if you're fortunate enough to travel to conferences and that, I always encourage people not just to stay in their sort of in their perspective. They should sort of broaden out and try and reach more broader, get a much more broader base. I think also, if you're working in the National Stats Office, there's a lot of opportunity to move around inside an office. Often we have a generic, a design analyst or a statistical analyst or whatever, and then so you can actually move and learn more about GDP, or move and learn about household labor force measures. And I think, that you should take those opportunities to help give you a broad base. And the reason I say that is that when data is disseminated, it needs to be put in context. So you can't just look at the CPI, the price index, in isolation. You need to look at other factors about what's happening to the economy through GDP, what's happening to the labour market, what's happening to the housing stock? Because people who live in different housing situations have different drivers for their societal change. So you've got to understand how all these things fit together. It's a very, very official stats is a rather large network.
Yes, I studied statistics 25 years ago, and there was not this distinction between statistics and data analysis. Now, data analysis is very important, but we need also data analysts. They need to know the statistics and the statistical methodology. This is important baggage for them. Anyway, last question, I promise was 10 minutes. I worked in the National Statistical Office. When I met people, I introduced myself, what you do, I work in NSO, blah, blah. And, always they say, this is government stuff, they change everything, you work for the government. Official statistics, we statisticians, we define official statistic neutral. Do you buy that? Why is neutral? Or why is not?
So yeah, I'm firmly in the camp that official statistics have to be neutral, and they have they need to be independent as well of government. And the sole reason I say that is that you can't be producing official statistics that are biased one way or another to the government of the day. Because otherwise, if say inflation gets too high, that makes it's difficult for people to be able to purchase products and how they live and their living standards. Now, some governments naturally might want to suppress the CPI number, and that's actually not a thing we should be encouraging or supporting. And so therefore we need to be using international standards, best practice, independence to truly reflect what is happening in society. Otherwise, everything will be nice and rosy, and it won't be society. And like I said, it's also the international comparability as well. If we don't use standards and follow good practices, then international comparability isn't as good, and that affects trade and trading partners and arrangements with trade and things like that. So all those aspects have to come together, and that's what the United Nations and OECD and World Bank. That's why they're really firm on using standards and agreeing standards and using standards to allow that comparability. And so therefore, the only way that happens is through neutrality and independence, which I'm a very firm believer of.
Yes, I think also people sometimes doesn't realize that these offices are very big. For instance, in Italy or in Netherlands, you have 3,000 employees, and GDP, inflation, PI, poverty are not calculated by one person. And of course, in the National Statistical Office, there will be people, statisticians, they vote as well. Then, of course, you have your idea, but your colleagues has an opposite idea. And the GDP is calculated by more than 100 people, 3-4 institutions, or even more. Then it's impossible to change the figure with so many people involved, so many different political parties involved. It's not easy at all to change one comma. Tell me if it's wrong.
Oh, well, no, you're not wrong. But I should also comment, because I do a lot of work in the Pacific, where there is sometimes only one person in the statistics office, or and they still have to produce GDP and CPI and measures like that. And so for them, even though there is only one person, they do need to meet some standards. They do need to be independent and neutral. So I don't disagree with you at all that there is a level of peer review in many offices, but also in smaller offices there is peer review. It's just not within office. It's between offices or between agencies. So OECD, they do a great job at facilitating standardization at many different levels. And also when you think about some of the African countries that are developing, Africa, Asia, through 8 different countries. They're not. You don't get it right first time, but it's a process of improvement, and that's where people like OECD and that they have differing levels of maturity, I suppose you'd say. But it is all still working towards the same goal. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Enjoy your day, enjoy your job for today, and maybe soon will be published this interview in clips in different channel, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. We can share, comment, maybe have a question. Thank you very much again to be with us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to it.